It's interesting to think kind of, I was just trying to think exponentially there for a moment about how, if the, things like RLHF and the underlying LLMs, assuming exponential improvements over the next 10 years, and just how much the model's outputs given a prompt have improved over the last 2 years. It's interesting to think, you could wake up in the morning and say to your whatever, it's probably just, in your home everywhere, listening to you, and you say, I'd like to have a great day today.
Right. Well,
And
okay,
then,
I'm going to let you in on a secret because I already do that. And so I have, I use a load of these models and we can talk about, why I use which one when. But I use Claude on my phone quite regularly, and I will drop my daughters to school. And on the way back, Claude has an audio mode. And it'll take up to 10 minutes of audio. So I will hit the audio button and I'll drive off and I will download everything in my brain. And there's not much in my brain, so I can do it in 10 minutes. I will say, okay, Claude, I have to, think about a speech I'm giving. Here are the ideas that I've got in my mind. Here's the audience. And that's all I've got to say about it for 2 minutes. And then I might say, okay, Claude, also, I've got to renew my car insurance. I've got to pay that parking ticket. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And I'll keep talking, and it'll be like health stuff, home stuff, cognitively demanding stuff like presentations and speeches. It'll be operational stuff like, remind me to figure out what's happening with the Stripe refund, the issue that we've had. And then at the end, I'll say, right, Claude, I've given you this grab bag of things. Organize it sensibly for me. And it will go off and do that. And then when I get to my desk 15 minutes later, I'll just open the Claude app on my computer, and I've got my to-do list that's been done. And for a lot of those tasks, it will have written the letter to appeal the parking fine. It will have ordered my thoughts for the presentation or the speech, and explained where the gaps are. So I sort of do that, and it's good enough at 3.5 new Sonnet to make a big difference to my day, and hopefully now to everyone who's listening to this show's day.
nice. So then I get that idea of dictating, but then how do you then have it flow forward into these kinds of things like reminders or individual tasks? Where does that surface?
So yeah, that's the gap at the moment. So right now it's copy and paste, and I will just kind of copy these things and paste them across. There hasn't been a great an example that I know that can grab the context of something as amorphous and confused as a speech through to a bunch of trivial to-dos and make sense of how to break them apart. I mean, what Claude will do is it'll say, okay, then you had a list of to-dos, and it will, in markup, it'll put the double hashes and it'll be big and bold, and then there'll be a list of to-dos in bullet list, and it generally gets that right. But we're missing that step to action, which is what all the AI companies are promising this year.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's something, a company like Apple, which has been slow relatively, and that is kind of their MO. They haven't been at the forefront of LLMs, but you can anticipate that they have people that are working on
Sure.
integrating all of their applications and allowing those kinds of flows to start to happen, to be that middle layer and connect applications to allow us to have, okay, the emails are drafted. They're, just press send when you've read them, and your to-do list is in your, reminders app on your
Mm.
desktop and in your iPhone and so on.
Well, I think there's something that I wrote on in my newsletter, which was about the way in which this ecosystem might expand, and it was about the fact that there would be lots of AI agents supporting us. So the idea of an AI agent is that it's an AI system that's more than one shot. It persists state, and it can potentially do something useful at the end of it. And I use a few of these. I imagine we're going to have hundreds, if not thousands, of agents that are circling around us for us, working on our behalf, in the same way that we have hundreds of apps on our phone, and within each app, lots of functions. But then I think we will need a supervisor agent, like a chief of staff, that we can just blurt at. Because one of the things that I have always been terrible at, because I'm super impatient, is switching from app to app to app. So in the end, I still just keep everything in Notebook, right? I know there's Notion, and I know there's Trello, and I know there's Jira, and I know there's all these things, and I've designed my life to never have to actually be disciplined to use those, because I find it frustrating. And I think that the thing that I would hope will end up happening is that we have our own personal supervisory AI system where we can be a bit unstructured, and then it figures out which agents to send the task to, because I don't want to switch context to say, now I'm doing a to-do list and previously I was brainstorming. I just want to move seamlessly. And I'm not sure that Apple will do that, because it's never really been their MO. And I'm expecting that somebody else might try and do that.
Yeah, yeah, you could be right. And of course, Google, with their Android phone and Chrome browsers, they could be well positioned yeah. Maybe iPhone users in a few years will say, "Oh man, I'm going to have to get
I have to go to
into the
Android.
Android ecosystem because everything is just so well interconnected." And I have my AI agent chief of staff that can just quarterback,
Hmm.
to use the American term,
Are you
all the
using
aspects.
any? Are you using anything that you might call an AI agent?
Yes. So the main thing that I've been using for that is you.com, dot
Mm-hmm.
com.
Yeah, Richard Socia's company. Yeah,
Richard Socher's company,
yeah.
exactly. And we had Richard's co-founder and CTO, Brian McCann, on the show
Mm.
a couple of months ago, episode 835,
Wow,
back in
you've got a good
November.
memory.
I've got the spreadsheet open in front of me, and
Right.
it happens to be just recent enough that I didn't even have to scroll or search within it. Um, and so, yeah, so, U.com has some pretty cool functionality for allowing you to spin off research tasks. So it has a research mode that
Mm-hmm.
could run for, 10, 15 minutes for a typical task. And it does a great job of kind of, in a way that, so it sounds like you, Claude 3.5 Sonnet is my preferred LLM at the time of recording. And I use it as kind of my default go-to because I more so than initially when ChatGPT first came out, that was kind of my go-to, and then Anthropic. Just there's something, not only is the user experience to me kind of friendlier and warmer, but the outputs are just so often I provide so little context, and I'm blown away by how with just this ugly pair of words that I throw in, it somehow knew exactly what I wanted and gives me the response. So it reduces a lot of effort for me in terms of prompting to go back there. But yeah, the disadvantage of a model like Claude 3.5 Sonnet is you're dependent on the model weights that are trained. You can't do real time lookups of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so with you.com, that's been where I've been going to be able to kick off real time research tasks where it pulls in information from lots of different resources in real time. It has a central agent that's figuring out how to break down the task into lots of small subtasks, and then it spins up lots of sub agents to go off and do the individual pieces of research.
Yeah, so that's super interesting. That in the spirit of how fast this world is changing at this exponential rate, U.com did not offer that when I last checked it a few months ago, and of course now it does. Yeah, no, that's super fascinating. I'll go and give it a look out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's brand new. So, what other tool? You mentioned that that you could tell us what other tools you use other than Claude, and I'd love to know what other kinds of
Sure.
day to day tools are you using.
I mean, I use pretty much uh, the Google Gemini, the research capability in Gemini Advanced. I use Notebook LM for certain classes of wide scale research when I've got lots of academic papers that I need to go through. One of my I use a tool called Fixer, which is FYXER. I'm an investor in this company, and so that looks at my Gmail and it does its best to pre-can my responses, so that when I go through my Gmail, it's often given me uh, two responses. Yes, I can attend your party, and no, I'd love to. I'm really bummed that I can't, but I can't. And then I just choose the one I want, and that saves me quite a bit of time. But recently, I've been playing around with workflows that involve a few agents. So in this case, I might want to have some support for an idea that I'm thinking about. So, say for example, I'm thinking about parallels between the growth of capacity in compute and data storage with the growth of capacity in the railway industry in the 19th century, right, where there was overcapacity. So, in the old days, I might have gone just to Claude and the old days, I mean November 2024, I would have gone to Claude and I would have said, Claude, look at this from the perspective of a historian of technology. And then I'd say, now, Claude, look at it from the perspective of an investor and give me a view. And I would manually go through this. So now I have this workflow where I can define three experts, and one might be a historian of technology, one might be an investor, and the third might just be a cynic. And then I will put the question to this network of agents, which are all sitting on top of different large language models. And a fourth agent will be an orchestrator and will ask them to argue between themselves until they've got to a point where they either fundamentally agree or disagree, and then it gives me my final result. So then I run that process, and it takes about 5 or 6 minutes. Like you said, Ucom will take 5 to 10 minutes. And it does cost something, because I'm burning through tokens, so it'll cost me 20 cents. But after 5 or 6 minutes, about half the time, I've got a really, really good critical overview of my issue, which I can then go off and do more research on. Half the time it fails. It just gives you complete pabulum rubbish. And the way I look at that is, when I've worked with teams and you give them these open-ended research tasks of teams of humans, about half the time they don't give you anything good. That's the nature of it, right? And about half the time they do. So right. My team uses these tools. I use these tools, but that's one of my favorites. It's one of the key sort of properly agentic workflows that I now use, and we designed and we built it in in one of these sort of agent workflow platforms that are sprouting up everywhere.
And so, what API are you calling in there? You mentioned burning through tokens. Is that
it's
Claude or?
So you can choose any one that you want.
Right.
I mix and match. I tend to have one O1 in there, which is the OpenAI reasoning model that's meant to be much, much more structured. I always have at least 2 Claude 3.5s because they're so good. But I think that you want to get to my point. I spoke about this earlier, that when you're learning, you want to get closer to the metal than be abstracted too much by the product layer. So one of what you want to be able to do is configure the models a little bit more, like play with their temperature score. So temperature is this, how straight-laced or wild is the temperature going to be. So, temperature 0.1 is like your pastor at church, and temperature 1.5 is like Van Wilder, party liaison. And you want a mix of those but you want your evaluation model to be quite sensible but still creative. So temperature of 1. So you can only access those parts of the API if you are talking to the API rather than having it interfaced by some third-party tool. So increasingly we try to get closer to that so we can learn through experimentation what works for each different context.
Nice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I don't think, did you happen to mention the tool that you're using for orchestrating this? I don't know if you mentioned that.
Oh, so I use one of 2 different tools. I use one called Wordware, which I'm an investor in, and another called lindy.ai. So they're both they're sort of similar but different. I mean, again, these are all products that are finding their product market fit. I mean, Wordware, of course, I recommend people try first. Disclosure: I'm an investor.
Nice, yeah. And lindy.ai is LINDY.
Yeah, that's right.